tell us a little bit why this Lewis model is more relevant today than ever.
Well, the Lewis model was it comes from Sir W. Arthur Lewis, a Nobel Laureate in economics, one of the early ones. And his model basically said that an early stage developing country grows by bringing essentially, underemployed labor from traditional sectors like agriculture into the modern economy, typically in manufacturing, labor-intensive manufacturing. And that process goes on quite a long time, multiple decades sometimes, and it's a very powerful growth engine. But it reaches its limit after you've extracted enough labor from the traditional sectors. And at that point, you reach a point that's called the Lewis turning point, at least for those who pay attention to these things. And at that point, you can't grow using that model. You need more traditional sources of productivity increase, more or less across the whole economy. So what I said, Sherry, is that, by analogy, we've had a multi-decade process of bringing massive amounts of underutilized productive capacity in emerging economies into the global economy. It had clearly deflationary effects, both primary in the sectors they were operating in, but secondary because of displaced employment. And my conjecture, it's hard to be sure about these things, is that we're entering a version of that turning point, right, where the massive demand that's been created by the growing middle classes in the emerging economies, combined with the exhaustion of underutilized productive capacity, means we're in a different regime. So,
practically speaking right now, does that mean that we're going to continue to see these higher rates, that we're going to continue exhausting our productive capacity? And what would that mean for really a very highly indebted global economy?
Well, it certainly creates risk. So, on the first part of that question, I would say that the big question mark is the digital transformation. So the digital transformation that we're in the middle of now has the potential to significantly produce a productivity burst. And in aging societies, that may be pretty important. And if it happens, and happens fast enough, it will mitigate the sort of, demand exceeding supply side pressures that I was referring to before. So I want to register that. Having said that, if we do get persistent inflationary pressures that go beyond the well-known ones, the demand surge as we come out of the pandemic, hopefully, and the supply chain congestion, then we're going to have significant increases in sovereign debt on a very wide front, and rising interest rates, because central banks are going to have to respond or lose their credibility through loss of control of inflation. And if they do that, we're going to see a variety of things, repricing of assets. We'll see debt distress in economies that already had fragile kind of fiscal conditions and have had to run up debt because there was no other alternative. So it's going to be turbulent.
Yeah. Professor, is there any sort of saving grace out there on the inflationary front from an increase in productivity, or is there just not enough there, not enough fuel there with regards to productivity to sort of, I guess, pull us back from the abyss?
So I'm on the side of there is enough fuel, but you should know, since, I'm an academic, that there's a wide range of opinion on this, running from Robert Gordon, who says these technologies are really not significant with respect to productivity growth, and has argued that case pretty effectively, all the way through to sort of digital technology enthusiasts. I mean, I'm not quite at that end of the spectrum, but I do think that, prospectively, these digital technologies, assuming they're adopted, more or less across the economy and not just in a few sectors, have the capacity to produce massive productivity increases. They also have disruptive characteristics, changes in jobs and labor markets that have to be managed and dealt with.
You're also writing about climate change a little bit. It's been interesting. Central banks, even the Biden administration, has talked about the disinflationary forces of decarbonization. Now, it might take a while to get there, but that's on the horizon. Is that disinflationary to you as well?
I think to me, that's an open question. I mean, there's a massive amount of investment that's required to accomplish the energy transition that's required. The estimates run in the 3 trillion to 3.5 trillion. I guess I have to say, I don't think that's likely to sort of come on stream, really quickly. There's just too many difficult challenges associated with incremental investments at that level. But if they did come on stream, then, you have sort of quite unpredictable effects. Right. You could have inflationary pressures and you could have deflationary ones as well. And, I think it's beyond our forecasting capacity to know, which one wins.
Professor Spence, we've also seen an increased focus on wealth distribution, whether it's with China's common prosperity drive, Japan's new economy, or the protests in Chile and Colombia leading sometimes to government change. Are we setting up for a new global ecosystem where we're going to see a new form of capitalism? What could that look like?
Well, that would be a benign scenario in which the capitalist system adapts, under the heading of something like ESG or aligning of business and social and economic objectives. That would be a great outcome because we need all hands on deck to deal with the increasing patterns of inequality of income and wealth. But you could get another outcome, which is wild swings in sort of political and policy agendas from, ones that ignore growth and, focus entirely on distribution, swinging back to ones that focus on growth and productivity and, et cetera. And you can see patterns of that in the history of multiple economies, emerging economies. So, I'm hoping we get the first one. But I don't think there's any guarantees at this point. We could get the pendulum swing version as well.